Most businesses are obliged to pay value-added tax. This affects cash flow and cash budgeting. Our guest today is Marja Hokkanen. She is attorney at law, postdoctoral researcher at the Aalto Institute for Business Law, as well as a member of the EU Experts Group on Value-Added Taxation. Marja, welcome to our course. Can you please introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Moritz. So my name is Marja, and I've been working with VAT, so value-added tax, for over 25 years. So I have a master's degree in law, and then I have also a postdoctoral degree in economics, and then I was doctorated in 2019. I'm also running my own attorney's office where I concentrate on tax issues, especially value-added tax.
Marja, why is this topic important to you?
Well, value-added tax was actually introduced already in 1967 in the EU. And so we have had a value-added tax system in EU for a long time. At the moment, we have a value-added tax directive, which is actually ruling our national value-added tax systems in all EU countries. And value-added tax is part of every business's everyday lives, and I like it because there is so many. Every transaction is different, and actually VAT applies to all transactions more or less.
Interesting. If I can quickly comment on this, so you have mentioned the word directive. Does this mean that the VAT system is more or less the same in the whole European Union?
Well, yes, that's the case. So since end of 1960s, we've been ruled by this European value-added tax system, and at the moment we indeed have a directive which covers over 400 articles and many sub-paragraphs. And so it's it's the most harmonized tax system in the EU. And therefore the domestic VAT systems in the EU countries are very similar. However, there are some little differences, but in general we have a harmonized tax base.
So what does this mean in practice for an entrepreneur?
Well, for an entrepreneur, the harmonized VAT system means that if they have cross-border supplies, meaning if an entrepreneur, a business is supplying services or goods cross-border, the system that we are applying in Finland is very similar to that is applied in another member state where you might have your customer.
So can I deduct the VAT that I paid in one country in another country?
Well, yes. If we make it very simple, that's actually the idea. However, depending on what kind of supplies you are making and where actually that supply is taxed, that is also having the impact on the fact how you can deduct it. If you can deduct it on your monthly domestic VAT return, or if you can if you need to apply the deduction from another country. So you of course can only deduct the input VAT in the country where you are actually in the country that you actually or the VAT is paid.
So Marja, what is value-added tax and what is the value added that is taxed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Value-added tax means that actually the tax system is taxing value added that is actually made by the business who is obliged to pay VAT of its supplies. So tax is only paid of the turnover after you have deducted your input VAT. So it's kind of an output VAT minus input VAT. That is the value added that the company is making, and that's also the tax base that is taxed under VAT system.
Which means that the final one who bears the tax is then the consumer.
Yes. The ideal system in VAT would work in a way that all suppliers that are having economic activity and are therefore supplying goods or services are paying the VAT of the output supplies. And at the same time, they can deduct all the input VAT, so all the costs that are having some VAT into the prices. And as this goes through the chain of the supplies, finally, when the consumer, private person, is buying the good or the service, they don't have this right of deduction, and that means that they are paying the VAT of the whole turnover of the whole chain of the supply.
So everyone who runs a business is obliged to pay VAT. Is it this way?
Well, in generally, yes. Everyone who is having the turnover over the threshold over that country, which is actually identified in the domestic legislation, needs to pay VAT if they are having economic activity. It doesn't matter in what if you are having a company or if you are providing supplies as a private person, as long as your activity is regarded as an economic activity, you are actually a taxable person in terms of VAT. However, every member state have a threshold, and in Finland this threshold is 15,000 euros at the moment, so in 2022. And if your threshold is exceeded, then you need to register for VAT and pay tax of your supplies.
So that means that if I have an economic activity, then I am a VAT taxable person. But if I'm below the threshold, then I don't have to pay VAT. If I'm above the threshold, then I have.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. But you, of course, have a right to register from the first euro. And sometimes that's profitable because at the same time when you register for VAT, you also get the right to deduct the input VAT. So many times businesses want to register already from the first euro. And it's also good to notice that when we are following this threshold of 15,000, you should pay attention to the fact that this 15,000 is calculated on 12-month periods, so like your financial year, which is 12 months. And if that would happen, that you would figure out in your 11th month of financial year that now I'm going to go above the threshold, 15,000, that would actually mean that you need to pay the VAT from the first euro. So it doesn't help you to say that, oh, I didn't know at the beginning that, I would go above the 15,000. Actually, then it means that you need to pay retroactively the VAT from the first euro.
So do I understand correctly that if you have a limited liability company, you basically always want to be registered for VAT?
Well, yeah, normally yes, because of course the expectation is that you will make profit, and one day it will be profitable enough to exceed the threshold, which is still quite small, so 15,000 in a financial year. And also there is a nice relief system built into that Finnish VAT system, and that is that if you're registered for VAT and you will find out at the end of the year that your threshold was still, your turnover was still under 15,000, you will actually get back all the VAT paid to the state. So that's a special relief system that is built into the value-added tax system in Finland. This is not something that every EU member state has. Some do, but Finland, we have this kind of a relief. So there is actually no risk of paying VAT if your turnover will be under 15,000.
So what about freelancers? Is this the same advice that you should pay it first and then get it back later on, or are there special cases where you need to do something different?
Well, I would say that especially if you have lots of expenses at the beginning, then I wouldn't see any reason why not to register, because when you register, you also get the right to deduct the input VAT of your purchases. And that's many times a big money. And at the beginning, when you don't really have the output supplies that much, it means that you get refunded all the input VAT from the state. But at the same time, I need to mention that tax authorities, of course, want to have a real, or you need to have a vision and you need to show the tax authorities as well that you are really doing this for economic activity and not just to use this as a cash machine from the government.
So for all the students, you cannot buy your textbooks and deduct the VAT for your consulting company if you are not actually selling services as your consulting company.
Well, yes, that is the fact. However, we have court cases, national court cases, and also court cases from the European Court of Justice, where they say that if you really have an intention to run the economic activity, but at one stage later on, when you have already registered, you would find out that, this idea didn't fly, or something else came up and destroyed your great idea of doing business. There are court cases saying that even if that would happen, you could still keep your input deductions, but of course then you need to be ready to have some maybe dispute with the tax authorities to really show them that the intention was right at the beginning.
So do I or my company need to register for paying the value-added tax?
Yes, indeed. You need to register for VAT, and you do that at the same time that you usually register your company. So it's on the same form that you are using also for registration for VAT purposes.
So are there any exceptions to this rule?
Yes, indeed. There are some exceptions. There are not too many because VAT system as such should be really a money machine for the state. So all the VAT is actually paid to the state budget. But there are some exceptions, and the biggest ones are financial and insurance services, social and health services, and educational services. Then we also have some other minor exemptions, but those are the biggest ones. So before you start the business, you should indeed make sure that you are in the scope of VAT and you are actually obliged to pay the VAT of your supplies.
So if you're obliged to pay VAT, what do you then do? Do you charge this then from the customer, or?
Yes. You need to, on the top of your sales price, you need to add the value-added tax. And depending on the supply, so depending on the good or service you are supplying, the VAT rate might be different. So the standard regular VAT rate in Finland is at the moment 24%. However, we also have two reduced rates. We have 14% for the goods, food stuff and restaurant services, and then we have 10% for some other supplies, and these cover, for example, medication, books, cultural services, transportation services, so personal transportation services, and so on. So there are some supplies under these reduced rates, but most of the supplies are taxed with 24%.
So what do I have to do with the invoices? Do I have to store them for the tax authorities, or?
Well, yes, that's also a very good question, because in a value-added tax, we have our own rules for invoices. So invoices need to cover certain information, and this is quite a long list of information that you need to have on the invoice. So you should indeed check that you have all the information there, and you need to also keep the invoices for 6 years after the financial year. So it can be even 6 plus 1 years that you need to keep the invoices. And one more thing about the invoices and the information on the invoice is that it's especially important also for the purchaser that the invoices are correct, because based on the regulation, if you receive an invoice which doesn't have all the information, that might mean that you cannot deduct the input VAT. So there's a little penalty, which can be quite big in some cases. So it's for the interest of the purchaser as well to check that invoices are correct.
So this is one more reason to outsource your bookkeeping to a service provider who knows how to archive properly, how to pay your taxes on time, and how to keep up with the changing regulations.
Yes, indeed, that's correct. So at least you should consult somebody who knows the regulation and can help you to get started and tell you how the invoices should be formed and also kept in your registry.
So, and oftentimes these invoices are electronic already. So is it okay to just have electronic archives?
Yes, actually Finland is now moving to this system that you don't anymore need to have invoices on paper form. So you can have totally an electronic archive, and it's just necessary that you can give the access to the tax authorities to your invoices in electronic form, at any moment. So that needs to be kind of open access between the archive and the tax authorities. That needs to be possible, but otherwise they can be totally electronic. But this is again one thing that if you have economic activity in other EU countries, you should indeed check the domestic regulation, because there are differences in terms of invoicing in this respect.
So if my company needs to pay the value-added tax, when do I actually need to pay it?
Yes, indeed. You actually give the VAT return and you pay the VAT at the same moment. So they go hand in hand. And if your turnover is over than 100,000 euro in a calendar year or financial year, meaning 12 months, you need to give the return and pay the VAT on monthly basis. For example, from January, you need to give the return and pay the VAT the 12th of March, and then February, meaning you need to give the return and pay the VAT the 12th of April. However, if your turnover is less than 100,000, you also might have a chance to just give a return on quarterly basis or even once a year. But this is something that you should also check before starting the economic activity, so that you are in line with the rules, with the reporting.
How do you actually pay this tax?
Well, it's very easy these days. We have in Finnish tax authorities, they have a web page, and also the page called My Tax, Omavero, and there you can actually fill in the return and pay the VAT. So it's very easy. You will get the access, and you can use that with your banking details, the ID, with the banking ID.
Okay. So often when a student especially starts a company, it's a small-ish business in the beginning and might begin late in the year. So are there any reliefs in the taxation system or value-added tax system for these small young companies?
Well, yes, there is. We have a relief system, which actually means that only when you go over 30,000 of turnover, you are obliged to pay the full VAT. So you can apply for a relief when your turnover is less than 30,000 per financial year, which is again 12 months. This is good to remember, because many times the first financial period can be more or less than 12 months.
So we were speaking about input VAT. So can you elaborate a bit more, when can a business deduct input VAT and when not?
Yes, indeed. When you are operating as a VAT taxable person, meaning you are registered for VAT and you're obliged to pay VAT of your supplies, it also gives you a right to deduct the input VAT. So VAT included all your purchases. Well, this is the main rule, and this is actually the idea of the European VAT system, to have a full recovery of the input VAT. However, we are some costs that are not deductible, and these are, for example, entertainment costs, also the private cost of the employees, and personal cars. So, for example, personal cars, which are, of course, a big investment, they need to be 100% in VAT taxable use before they can be deducted. So there is no partial deduction. You cannot drive with that car to home and back to work, because that is regarded as a private consumption.
So if you do business in several countries or buy supplies or services from another country and sell them to another country, how is the value-added tax treated in that case?
Well, there we have several issues to solve. First of all, as a supplier, we need to make sure that if we have a so-called fixed establishment in any other country, that your country of the domicile. So this is the first thing that you should check. Do you have employees? Do you have other resources to supply goods or services from another in another country? If that's the case, that might actually form you a so-called fixed establishment, and that makes you to be just a normal VAT taxable person in that country. The other question is then, in which country the supplies are taxed. In this European VAT system, we have place of supply rules. So we are actually playing with so-called place of supply rules, and these place of supply rules actually determine which country has the right to tax that supply. And every time we make a supply cross-border between two EU countries, or from EU to outside the EU, or vice versa, we need to check place of supply rules and first be sure in which country the tax needs to be paid. Here it depends on who is the purchaser. If the purchaser is a private customer or another business, we have different rules. It also depends on if the purchaser is in another EU country or outside the EU. It also depends on, are you supplying goods or services, and if you're supplying services, what kind of services you are supplying. So there are many things that needs to be assessed before you can actually say in which country the supply is taxed.
So if I would start, let's say, a web shop, I would make something in Finland and then sell it to anybody who wants to buy, let's say, inside European Union. How would the VAT work in that case?
Yes, that's a very good question. Actually, in July 2021, new rules were introduced for these kind of supplies. So meaning situations where you order goods via internet, and then the supplier is sending the goods to another EU country to a private customer. And these rules are actually under so-called one-stop shop system. And these supplies are actually taxed in the country of the purchaser. So if you are a Finnish company and selling goods via internet, that means that actually you have a liability to pay VAT to every single EU country where you have the customers. However, the system is now made simple, or as simple as possible for the supplier, because you need to only register once to this so-called one-stop shop system in your own country, so here in Finland, and you can do the reporting and pay the VAT via your own tax authority. So you don't need anymore to register in other countries, but you can use this one channel, so-called one-stop shop, and it should be as easy as the reporting in domestic supplies.
Okay, so what if I don't sell physical products, but I sell, let's say, educational videos? I have a company in Finland, and I have customers in other EU countries buying my digital services.
Yes, educational services are very interesting because we have, for different services, we have different rules. We have some main rules depending on if you have a private customer or if you have another company as a purchaser. If we are talking about the private customers as purchasers, usually in services the VAT is paid in the country of the supplier. However, in some situations, the country of where the place of supply is actually in the country of the purchaser. But here in your example of educational services, I said that this is very interesting because sometimes we have had dispute if these educational services that are provided via internet, if they are so-called electronic services or not. Because electronic services tax in the country of the purchaser. However, educational services are taxed in the country of the supplier. So you didn't give me an easy question this time. So you should indeed check every time how your service is regarded in terms of VAT.
So then another example, maybe even the last one. So if I sell physical products from my company to companies in other EU countries, how is that then taxed?
Yes. For B2B services, the business-to-business supplies of goods inside EU, we have so-called intra-community supply and intra-community acquisition rules. And this means that actually the supply is taxed in the country of the purchaser. And there we also normally use so-called reverse charge system, meaning that it's actually the purchaser as a local taxable person is reporting that supply on behalf of the supplier, and then if he makes the purchase for its VAT taxable activity, it can also deduct the VAT of that supply. But that is called so reverse charge, and that should be also on the invoice when you do this kind of a supply. So usually it's in the country of the purchaser that is allowed to tax that supply, and also we use that reverse charge. So actually it's the obligation of the purchaser to report the VAT in that country.
So this is quite a simplification, this reverse charge, because that means that only one person, the person which anyway makes the reporting to get the input VAT back, at the same time reports the VAT of the seller.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So this makes it simpler for the supplier because the supplier doesn't need to register in that country where the place of supply is. And when the purchaser would in any case ask for the refund of that supply, it's now reporting the supply and then deducting the same supply. So it's actually plus minus zero many times for that purchaser. However, this is the case only if the purchaser has the right to deduct.
Is this reverse charge system also used within Finland? or within the domestic context?
Well, yes, the reverse charge is sometimes used also in a domestic context, and this also depends a little bit of the country, because reverse charge is actually, when it's used domestically, it's usually used to avoid tax avoidance. And in Finland, for example, we apply reverse charge for supplies of some for gold. We apply it also for construction services. We apply it for supplying some metals, like aluminium, for example. So there are some supplies that are indeed under reverse charge. However, in some other countries, they might use this for other supplies, like mobiles or mobile phones, or for IT products, for example. So you should indeed check if you're operating also in other countries.
Okay. So in some cases, the company doesn't make sense, it doesn't succeed, and you want to close down your business. Mm-hmm. So how is the VAT treated in these cases?
Yes, well, the rest of the valuables that you have in storage, for example, or tools, whatever you are having bought into your VAT taxable business, and what you have deducted the input VAT of, you should actually sell them further with the VAT. So just like you would sell it otherwise in your VAT taxable business. However, if you want to keep those goods yourself, then you should also return the VAT deducted to the government. So actually you would regard them as you would sell them to yourself with VAT. So because in that case, those goods are actually ending up to your private consumption. There in those prices should be VAT, and that is why you need to return the VAT deducted earlier during in your business.
So what are the key takeaways of all of this?
Yes. Well, I think the key takeaway number one is that before you start the business, consult somebody to explain you what are those the obligations that would be in your case valid. Also, if you think yourself that you are going to supply exempt services like financial services, and this is because the definitions of also exempt services, for example, are very detailed, and it is very important that you indeed are sure if you need to pay VAT or not, because also the penalties are very high. That can be 50%. Yes, maybe the other key takeaway is the fact that sometimes you might forget that VAT is not your money, but it's money to be paid to the government, to the state. So when you price your goods or services that you supply, remember that if you have another VAT taxable person as a customer, it usually can deduct the VAT. But if you have a private person, it needs to pay the whole sum, meaning the price plus the VAT, which is usually that 24% from his or her pocket. So this is, of course, something to remember, that also you need to pay that VAT to the state.
So you have to take it into account in your budgeting.
The cash budgeting.
Cash budgeting. Yeah.
So yes, you need to take into account in your cash budgeting that the VAT that you receive from your client is never your own money.
So thank you for sharing your insight and experience with us.
Thank you very much.